Hey, everybody. Welcome to another session on the Decade of Downtown. This is a special edition. We were able to get some time with Jenna Saucedo-Herrera, and as busy as her schedule is, and there's like a million things going on with workforce development, economic development, our real estate, like it's crazy. We were able to get some time with her, and I'm very, very excited to share this conversation with you because we're going to talk about the economic development impacts of not only the Decade of Downtown, but also just the economy here in San Antonio, where it's been, where it is today, and where it's going into the future. So I hope you'll welcome me in saying hello to our featured guest here, Jenna Saucedo-Herrera, the president and CEO of the San Antonio Economic Development Foundation. Jenna, thanks for joining.
Thank you so much for having me, Dax. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, happy to have you. I know, again, like I mentioned in that intro, that was probably a little long. You have so many different projects. You've got so many stakeholders and relationships that you're balancing and juggling. I can't tell you thank you enough for taking a few moments to share this, because I think this is some of the coolest work that's been going on in San Antonio in a very long time. And I'm really happy that we get a chance to dive into it and make it a part of the San Antonio Startup Week festivities.
Definitely. Well, we were just talking about it before we started recording, but I'm happy to be here. And this is a part of the job, right? Because we go out and we tell the San Antonio story, but everybody that is tuning in to your podcast during Startup Week and even outside of Startup Week obviously has a vested interest in the community. And so I'm happy to be here, and I look forward to working with all of you to continue to tell the San Antonio story.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for the plug. I like to say we have tens of listeners. We have 10. It's really great. No, this is going to be really fun. And we do have a really great audience of people that share this stuff. And you are, again, really great guest to have on and kind of talk through all of this. But what I would love to do is, I think there are quite a few people here that are watching this or listening to this, and they only really know you as Jenna Saucedo, the president, CEO, SAEDF. Maybe she came from another city. She's a high-powered executive. She's got all these ideas and vision and strategy. She's, moving mountains in San Antonio. But you're a native San Antonian. And so I think a lot of people may not know that, or maybe know your background. I'd love for you to just kind of talk a little bit about yourself and share some of your story with everyone.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for that intro. Very humbling. I appreciate it. But yes, I am a native San Antonian, and I'm extremely proud of it. I was actually born and raised just south of San Antonio in Elmendorf. So everything that I did, I went to school at Holy Name Catholic School on the south side, just right across the highway from Brooks. St. Mary's University alumna, worked at CPS Energy for about a decade or so. And I have just, San Antonio is so great. Every time that, I looked up or had another company offering me something outside of market, either the company that I worked for, CPS Energy, or something in San Antonio would just present a challenge that I absolutely needed to pay attention to, or that I needed to lean into. The EDF was an example of that. So I'm just such a big fan of San Antonio. As we continue to talk about time and time again, we're really crafting the story about San Antonio. We have a rich history and legacy, but we have so much more work to do. And it's kind of fun to get a chance to roll up your sleeves and do that for your hometown. I am married. I have an incredible husband. In fact, I haven't actually had a chance to tell you this, but hot off the press, breaking news.
Here we go.
Actually expecting our first child next year in January.
Congratulations. That is like groundbreaking. We're breaking news right here. That is
That's
fantastic.
right. We thought about, just doing the whole Kylie Jenner thing, and, we're working remotely, so maybe we should just have a surprise baby. But I'll tell your viewership, I'll tell the tens of viewers that we have on. And you know what, going back to my job today, right, I mentioned that San Antonio is always throwing challenges at me, and the EDF was one of those challenges. And I was contacted by some of San Antonio's business leaders. Wayne Peacock was the chair at the time, the current CEO of USAA, and he said, "Hey, I've got a challenge for you that I think you can help with." And fast forward 4 years that I've been at the organization, and I'll tell you, Dax, your job's pretty fun, but I think I have the best job because I get a chance to travel the world and tell the story about my hometown, right? Promoting it for business investment, promoting it to different talented people. And then when I'm here at home, I'm working with folks like you and so many others to continue to improve the community, right? So that folks can grow their families here, can grow businesses here, and they just want to stay here and flourish. And so again, I love what I do at the EDF. I feel like it was a job that was made for me. And I think that, you know, being a San Antonio native and having experienced San Antonio over the course of my life has prepared me well to sell it and do what I do today.
I love it. And you know what's really great as well about you in this role and just hearing your story, you're probably aware of it, but I want to just reinforce it for everybody. You really are a role model for a tremendous number of young women aspiring to leadership and in business here in San Antonio. I think prior to your arrival, it was a very limited number of females that we saw in such high-powered positions doing such just transformative work for the city at really the highest level. So the fact that you were able to do that with CPS and do some of that work and help shape the communications and strategy coming out of there, and then stepping into the EDF, kind of like right at the midpoint almost of the decade of downtown. I think it was around 2016, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Just stepping into that role and doing it so well and representing San Antonio. I just have to give you kudos for that, because you may not hear it enough, but I will definitely say it, and people are going to be nodding their head in agreement, listening or watching this right now. They really do view your work as a role model. They want to structure their career and their development in a very similar fashion because they've seen you achieve this here in San Antonio, and now you've made that possible. So I know there are a lot of other female leaders that have obviously come before and that are currently doing this work, but you represent something very special. And so I just wanted to give you some recognition on that.
Thank you so much. I'm really humbled to be able to do the work that I do.
Excellent. Love that. And, you know, and of course, congratulations on the COVID surprise. That's awesome. That is like a great little announcement we can put. You know, what I mentioned it here just a second ago, you joined kind of at this pivotal moment in the decade of downtown, which is interesting that the Economic Development Foundation, which, you know, you've described to me before and many others as the chief marketing officer of San Antonio, going out and helping spread the message of what we're about and what's the best of us. To join in the middle of the decade of downtown when there's this renewed investment in an urban core and a technology ecosystem, you know, what were your thoughts coming into it? You know, how focused was the EDF on the decade of downtown, or was that just one of many initiatives? What did that look like, if you can kind of go back in the time machine a little bit?
The EDF was very focused on the decade of downtown. So if you'll recall, I actually had the privilege of serving on the board of the EDF before they invited me to throw my name in the hat for the CEO position. And we had many a conversation specifically about the organization and where we were going into the future. And as you mentioned, you know, with the decade of downtown, San Antonio as a community was having those conversations. We were asking ourselves who we wanted to be when we grew up. And we realized that we needed to invest in a vibrant downtown if we truly wanted to grow the economy and propel it to become a top performing city. The EDF was having those same conversations about the community, but also about the organization. And so as the community was thinking, you know, through Julian's leadership and Graham's leadership, thinking about how to transform itself and move forward, the EDF was thinking that same way. And, you know, when it came down to who they were looking for in a leader, they wanted a leader that reflected that momentum, that reflected that energy and passion for where San Antonio was moving going forward. And I'll tell you that the momentum and the progress that was made, you know, we were midstream, right? We were mid-decade of downtown at the time, but, you know, geekdom had really kickstarted just a new vibrancy in our downtown core, and Tech Block had taken off, you know, just the year prior in 2015. And so, you know, we were all monitoring that, and there was just this new passion around not just downtown San Antonio and tech. It was about San Antonio, and we wanted to be downtown, and a lot of the folks were in tech, but it was really about young people getting engaged civically from a business perspective. And we knew at the EDF that we needed to collaborate with you guys, that we needed to strengthen those relationships. And if you fast forward to, where we're at now, we've actually seen real projects come from those strengthened relationships, right? The Hut Group, PAX, that was recently announced. And so that partnership, continues to be critical for us at the EDF. And of course, downtown will continue to be, because no economy can function in the way that we would want it to without a vibrant downtown. And now we have, some 20,000 San Antonians living here, multiple businesses, Level Up, CyberWorks, Booz Allen has selected downtown. So many great things happening in downtown San Antonio with what UTSA is doing with their, cyber school, business school. We're going to have the backpack factor. I think, to be honest, I came in at the right time to ride that wave and to really take advantage of the decade of downtown for EDF's purpose of growing business in the community.
And you touched on a few really key things there. And it just, as we've worked together and I've seen you work with others, a common refrain is the way that you build and develop relationships is so key to economics, right? And economic development specifically. And one of the things that we touched on in our conversation with Julian, talking about that first kind of domino that fell with the plan, was this unintended impact, I think. And I'm going to say unintended because while they had an intention through Graham's work and some of the others of getting the more technical workers, I don't think anyone really could have really expected the kind of response that we got from tech and entrepreneurs or others that were dying for the chance to not only bring those passions forward, but also to celebrate San Antonio and establish a new kind of pillar inside of the community. And that's what's been really interesting to me. And I'm curious about it. When you first came on board, while there was excitement about the urban core and the development, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but the technology ecosystem and kind of its financial impact was still somewhat limited. It was limited versus advanced manufacturing and our hospitality industries. How did that fit in those plans? Were there kind of real purposeful things you wanted to do to work to kind of help accelerate what was happening?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. It wasn't, just to be perfectly candid, it wasn't prioritized previously. So as you know, for decades prior to my arrival at the EDF, we positioned San Antonio for, the low cost operations, the service centers. And a lot of those service centers don't want to be downtown, right? In fact, they need more land, they need parking spots. And so they're looking out in the suburbs. And that was the strategy, right? It was any job is a good job. And I'll be the first to argue that any job is a good job, but we need the quality jobs if we want to propel the economy forward, right?
Right.
And those are the conversations that the EDF was having, right? We have always been a big military economy. We've always had a robust service sector. But if you think about how hard our service sector has been hit now in the COVID economy, right? I think that's a wake-up call. We've been talking about it for years, that we can't be over-reliant on one industry versus another, but our over-reliance on the service sector is what's proving to be one of the biggest impacts to our unemployment rates that continue to exist today. So long-winded way of saying the answer is yes, right? We knew we needed to build it. We need to build up our burgeoning tech industry. And we had so many different assets, to be honest, that our military industry had presented, right? So cybersecurity and our position there, that stemmed out of the military. What we're doing in bioscience, right? That stemmed out of the military, and everything that we're doing with military medicine. And so we had so many different opportunities to truly position San Antonio for those quality jobs, not just saying, hey, we want these different industries because they're sexy. No, we had a competitive position. We had a value proposition that we really just hadn't harnessed, and we certainly weren't telling the story. And so what you all were doing downtown and all of the progress that was being made, I mean, it was a perfect time for us to leverage that and to really flesh out what that value proposition is, what the story was for business investment in San Antonio. And again, we're seeing the fruits of that labor, although I'd argue we still have a lot of work to do, and I think the best is yet to come.
Yeah, and I want to touch on that a little bit later, because I think adaptability and recognizing the terrain change that's happened has been really key for us. Even during the decade of downtown, recognizing, hey, something special is happening in this corner, something special is happening in this neighborhood. How do we shift a little to create that as a new priority to, accelerate the growth accelerate the development and not just say, no, we made a PowerPoint 10 years ago. This is where it needs to stay, and we're going to stay on note. Having the ability to kind of move around and be flexible has been, I think, really key. And I definitely want to ask you a little bit about that in a second. But before we get into it, one of the things that I've always been really curious about, and I think some other folks are as well, when examining kind of those 2016 to 2018, when things really started kind of meshing well and we started seeing real traction take shape, what was, just what was some of the more surprising things that came out of that, either from our urban core? We also had a lot of regional wins. So was there anything really surprising to you that kind of stands out as like, well, that was unexpected, we'll take the win, it was great, we went at it, or an opportunity presented itself and we did what was necessary to win it? Anything stand out in particular?
Oh yes, and I hope that you come back to the putting a PowerPoint on a shelf conversation, because I think we've improved in a lot of places, and I'm happy to kind of talk through some of the areas where I still think that we need to move forward and progress. But yes, so let's see. There have been a lot of good things that have happened. I'd probably say that not necessarily surprised, but proud, certainly proud of all of the big manufacturing wins. Because, manufacturing is the gift that keeps giving. It has that multiplier effect, right? So, through projects like Navistar, producing an electric truck on the South, actually electric and diesel, so 2 times the supplier network. That's a gift that keeps on giving, because we've got to build out the supplier network to support that facility. So yeah, we announced Navistar last year, but now we've got to bring 6 to 8 of their suppliers to support that operation. And just like you've seen Toyota grow, you've got the tier 1 suppliers, tier 2 suppliers, Toyota's expansion, bringing the Sequoia here. That was just a beautiful, beautiful thing for us. We've been talking about getting another vehicle in San Antonio for the last 10 years or so. And at that time it was a second line, right? Because that's what the technology would call for. But the Sequoia coming to San Antonio presents more than just additional suppliers, right? We have Aishin and Cibolo and some suppliers in Seguin and elsewhere. But what that presents is not just another vehicle, it presents an opportunity well into the future when I'm no longer running economic development, because that facility, Toyota invested $500,000 into creating the world's only, for Toyota, large frame-based vehicle manufacturing facility. What that means is, yeah, they can make Sequoias and Tundras, but they can make any other Toyota vehicle. They can make 4Runners, they can make Tacomas.
Oh,
and
wow.
So think about it. Think about the future, right? I'm excited about the 400 million. I'm excited about the suppliers. But I'm thinking 10 to 20 years down the road, as Toyota corporate is making strategic decisions on where they manufacture vehicles, we now have the capacity and the technology and the wherewithal with our people to build out any of those vehicles. That's a big deal. So I would say that's probably what I'm most proud of. Victory was another cool one, right? USA having some conversations, and they basically said, EDF, go get them. And so, Cheryl and I got and we went up there and talked to their CEO's great, by the way. If y'all haven't had a chance to meet Dave Brown, we need to get him plugged in. He's young, he is brilliant, and he was ultimately the one that made the decision to invest in San Antonio. So a lot of good things that I'm proud of. Not necessarily surprising, just very proud of the accomplishments of our community.
Those are fantastic accomplishments. And I know there are a number to choose from. Anybody just needs to look in the Business Journal or anything else, and they can easily see all the wins that have stacked up. And also the collaboration that you've worked on. I'm really interested in, in talking about the manufacturing piece, because, that actually has a direct play. Toyota's been a wonderful employer in San Antonio. And oftentimes people forget that manufacturing and advanced manufacturing is at its core today technology based. It's robotics, right? And what I've seen, and I've had friends who have worked at Toyota and really developed their careers and gone on into some other capacities, it's just been a fantastic employer. And it speaks to the power of a private company investing in workforce development. So what I would like to start maybe transition now to is talk a little bit about where we're looking at right now in terms of our economic development meeting a real need for workforce development, because as you mentioned, we were very heavily dependent upon that hospitality sector. And now that that's kind of eroded right now and we're waiting for it to build up and people are doing some really cool things, it's going to take some time. So now's the time to kind of shift our focus to workforce development. How is that? What's that process been like, turning on the engine and getting people from kind of every conceivable side of an aisle to come together and say, how do we engage the next generation of talent and show them the right way to train so they can earn a great living and continue to help build San Antonio?
Yeah, well, as you're well aware, through your efforts at Tech Talent Central, I mean, economic development is workforce development, right? So it's no longer about real estate or incentives. The companies, I mean, that's a part of the overall decision-making process, but it really comes down to where can I get the talent, right? To competitively position our organization for success, right? Now, let's talk about some sobering and actually scary statistics, right? So if you look, we were talking about the COVID impacts and primarily the fact that our service industry, the hospitality industry, was impacted the hardest. So at the climax, there was about 160,000 San Antonians out of work that had filed for unemployment. And when you break down that data, about 80% of them, 80%, had less than a 2-year certification. So they had some high school, maybe a little bit of college, but they did not have a 2-year certification. So when you're talking about those great jobs at Toyota where you could make 6 figures working on robots that build cars, or any other job that's in high demand right now, because the COVID-proof industries were really tech and manufacturing and logistics. When you look at those different industries, they typically require a 2-year certification or more. And so there's a big challenge for us right now, because prior to COVID, we had a skills gap, right, that we were trying to address. We knew that we were trying to grow the tech industry, but we needed certain skill sets. Fast forward to the creation of Tech Talent Central and your role with Tech Block, right? Yeah. But we knew that we had a gap in tech and manufacturing. That all existed well before COVID. What COVID has done is it's just really pulled out the magnifying glass for us, right, to look at the challenge. So those industries are still hiring. We're still trying to find talent. You've seen them, right? New employer just selected Port of San Antonio, right? Technically, they're looking for folks. Pabst is looking for folks. But the impacted San Antonians don't necessarily have the education levels or the skill sets required to fill those roles. And so to your point, you know, there's a lot of ongoing work in workforce development just to have the conversation about the skills gap, right? And to dig deeper into how we can not just change the narrative about some of these industries so that people will pursue those career paths, but to actually have conversations around curriculum development and alignment to industry needs. But beyond that, I'm pretty excited, not to pull politics into this at all, because I don't think workforce is political in the slightest. I think investing in your people is the right thing to do. But as you know, there's a ballot initiative coming up in November to reallocate the 1/8 cent sales tax. So it's not a new tax, but just reallocating the sales tax to workforce recovery programs that would specifically target these impacted San Antonians and get them training in the industries that we are growing, in the high demand industries that we previously referenced. And so the city is looking at basically subsidizing that training through stipends and providing wraparound services, childcare, counseling, you name it, to support these folks. And that's not a near-term investment, that's a long-term investment, but it's going to be valuable and it's going to pay off for sure.
Yeah, and what's really cool, and I'm glad you brought that up, is it really, workforce development is a key thing. It's literally going to be the building block, and I hope folks that are, you know, again, I am not an economic development anything. I never even took a class. That, you know, don't worry about that. But even just me sitting in some of these meetings and having conversations with people, and especially in my work with Tech Talent Central and Tech Block, it has been abundantly clear to me that people and skilled people in these industries are truly they're the bait. They are the food source and fuel source for these companies with these great jobs and all the opportunities that when those jobs start flowing and those companies start moving here, it opens up a world of other opportunities. Entertainment scenes flourish, retail flourishes, food, all those little neighborhoods and scenes start sprouting up because more investment and more people have the means to invest in them. So I really view this as a foundational issue. And just from my exposure, I can't see why people would vote no. I think you have to vote yes. It is just this fundamental thing on if you really enjoy watching San Antonio grow and you want it to reach that next level, either for yourself or for your kids or for your friends who are working and wanting to, reach for those next levels in their career or their happiness and development, it starts with this. And I just can't reiterate it enough. I'm glad you brought it up, and I'll get off my soapbox here, but it's not a new tax. It's a reallocation. That's the best part of it. And I have firsthand seen those wraparound services from Project Quest and others that have done a tremendous job of helping people, punch back against life when it presents those challenges where they kind of present to you and say, hey, do you need to pay your bills? Or you need to go to school? These wraparound services help you. They give you tools and capabilities, to keep the priority. So I'm glad you brought that up. I'll put my soapbox back under my desk. It may make an appearance later.
I love it though. It's
Yeah.
all ships rise, right? I mean, it'll make us all better if we invest in San Antonians. It's the right thing to do. For sure.
Exactly. And the big thing that I really enjoy out of Startup Week here is, and why I'm so glad that you took some time to join us, is to give people some more information and stories around what's going on. Economic development is not being figured out on an Excel spreadsheet. It's just not. It's groups of people meeting constantly and working ideas out, problem solving, marketing, sales, operations. Like it covers the gamut of everything you can imagine. So the fact that we get to, pull the curtain back a little bit and let people understand and see how it works and why things like this are so important, and that it leads to good stuff for everybody, literally everybody.
Mhm.
So I'm glad we got to talk about that. And what I'd actually also like to do in talking about workforce development, I would be remiss to not mention some of the other major projects that you have helped really champion and kind of be the visionary for us in terms of economic development and the horizon of San Antonio as it shifts to I believe, a regional approach. Can you talk about some of the other areas? Like we know workforce is there. What are some of the other projects or things that people can expect to see in the next maybe 6 to 12 months, the fruits of this labor being done over the past 12 months?
Yeah, definitely. So you mentioned regional, right? And so let's kind of bring that down into how that will impact my operation going forward. In the past, the EDF has really been focused on Bexar County and San Antonio proper, right? And if you just benchmark against top performing metros across the country, in fact, just looking within the state of Texas at Austin, they represent a region, right? If you look at Dallas, they represent a region. Houston's the same way, right, with the Houston Partnership. And so it's certainly not a novel idea, but we are really fast forwarding into that space of how can we formalize the growth of the service territory, so to speak. So we have worked on an ad hoc basis. We, of course, have worked projects with Seguin and projects with New Braunfels, but we want to formalize that a bit, right? As we're out telling the story, you mentioned we're the chief marketing organization. As we're out telling the story, we want to grow the value proposition, right? We want additional tools in the toolkit to do that, and leveraging our regional partners in Schertz, in Seguin, in New Braunfels, in Bernie allows us to do that. So that's step one, right? We knew that we wanted to be regional. But then when you look at our services as an organization, how does that come to fruition? We're basically a marketing and a project management entity. And we focus on corporate recruitment, business retention and expansion, and workforce development. That's what we do. But when we brought all these different leaders together, as you mentioned late last year, and of course you were a part of that, and so many other folks around the community, thankfully, folks care about economic development, care about the future of San Antonio. But we really just streamlined the approach. We really just wanted to simplify, what does economic development mean? Because it means so many different things to so many different people. And we basically landed on, we needed to focus on jobs, people, and place. right? We have always been in the business of jobs, kind of the transactional side of growing jobs, working deal flow in the community.
Yeah.
But we realized that if we wanted to work bigger, better deals, if we wanted to secure the quality jobs, that we needed to invest in our people, which is what we've talked about, but we also need to heavily invest in our place, right? In the quality of life in San Antonio. And so that's basically where we felt. It's interesting. I'm getting a little long-winded now, but if you go back to the decade of downtown, without thinking through jobs, people, in place as a strategic framework, that was probably the first time our private and public sector leaders had come together to say, hey, if we seriously want to think about, growing the economy, so the jobs part of it, we need to think about the place, investing in downtown, because we need to bring the people. So we're kind of stealing out of Julian's playbook a little bit and reframing it. But that strategy, that framework is what will propel us going forward. And we're doubling down into those certain services, into certain geographies, to do what we've been doing, but to do it a whole lot better.
Yeah. That was a first draft, I think, was Julian's plan. Not that it wasn't great. Obviously, it led to everything else, but it was the first iteration, and the lessons learned, very fruitful, right? And I think it led to a lot of this. And it's exciting to hear that there's this kind of collaboration. And for folks that are kind of unaware or not sure of it, there have been, groups of people from across, just a huge cross section of our city, from different neighborhoods, industries, not just business people in suits. I'll tell you that. Everybody who knows me, I wear a black t-shirt everywhere. There are a whole lot of people like me as well that are just kind of doing the grunt work out here, and helping and just wanting to see how we can be and do good things. We're also a part of this process and these communications. And it's really exciting to know that the voices are heard and that we're really kind of uniting San Antonio behind this effort. And I kind of want to call it Greater San Antonio, but it's not, because Schertz and Bernie and, New Braunfels all have their own unique identities and communities. But like you said, when we're working together, there's something really special that can happen and be identified. And that's how every major market seems to identify themselves, is on this regional level with some anchor point at its kind of core, right? Like its city identity to a regional plan. So that's exciting that we're kind of stepping in that direction.
Yeah, I'm certainly excited about it. And I know we'll go live with some exciting initiatives in 2021. But, when you talk about the regional approach, obviously domestically it'll play well, but internationally, the companies that we're in front of don't know the difference between San Antonio and Austin, much less San Antonio and Schertz, right? So I think it makes sense. And then, of course, the next step would be, what does that mega regional strategy look like? How do we begin to, and we've already started, but how do we begin to better collaborate with our partners up in Austin and then down south, right, into Mexico and to Monterey? If we can truly activate that mega regional economy, I think that's when San Antonio will really start to grow into its own. So we've got some time, but that's what we're working towards, and it's very exciting.
Yeah, it's good to hear we're strengthening ourselves up, kind of, I won't even say post-COVID, but in response to everything with these plans and that have already been in motion, and bulking up the services needed for the next iteration, that mega region. That's really exciting. I think everybody that you just described in those communities and cities at a leadership level all instinctively know there's a real common sense approach to that could yield really, really great success. So Jenna, I know, again, we have some time in your calendar. I really appreciate you taking it. I'm going to ask you just one other question. And what I'd love to discuss is the horizon for San Antonio. While the mega region is there, I think a lot of people are saying, okay, we're going to do workforce. Hey, we'll go get a 2-year, or maybe we're going to finish our 4-year degree. We're going to move up the ladder. We're going to do some things. But as a community, what is it that you think is really that next wave, next approach? Is it tighter relationships between our communities and unifying the city a little bit more? Is it really kind of that mega region strategy? What is it on the horizon that really kind of gets you excited to say, the successor to me, or even that successor, they're going to have some really great tools to work with and develop with because of what we're going to be doing now?
That's a great question. And it's hard. It's actually really, really hard to pick just one thing. I think the regional approach, I think the work that we're doing with our place team to develop what the regional identity or brand is going forward, I think is going to be a huge deal for us. Um, the relationships are always important. But you know what I'd say, and this is probably just kind of advice for everyone at all times, but I definitely think it's something that we have continued to work on at the EDF. I know you live by this, and I hope that San Antonians continue to live by it. But we need to continue to challenge the norm. We should not be content with the progress that we made and with where we're at today. We need to continue to challenge ourselves to get better, because that's the only way you can improve. I remember when I joined the EDF, you know, the organization was very traditional in nature. My predecessor had been here for 32 years. He was a CEO for 26, right?
Wow.
And there are a lot of organizations in San Antonio that are well-intentioned and that are doing good work. But, you know, folks were afraid to step on toes or just to ask questions. You know, could we be more efficient if we better partner together? Or maybe we don't need as many organizations, right? At the EDF, we actually acquired 2 nonprofits, and SA Works and then the Free Trade Alliance, the international organization previously. So I think that groundwork that we've continued to lay over the last 4 years with just challenging the norm, asking ourselves, what can we do to get better, I think is going to continue to prepare us going forward. And again, it's not about you, it's not about me or any egos, it's about the community. And it's about how we can be more efficient in improving ourselves at large. And I think that's probably, if I had to pick one thing, it would be that, just continue to challenge ourselves to be better.
I couldn't have said that any better myself. I think that's a huge thing, is disruption and innovation. And there are so many things, not even industry and professional wise, but even, you know, personally. I always think when I hear that, and I haven't heard it articulated so well until just now, it makes me think about also some of the ways in which we've just approached San Antonio and living here. I think we all know and are aware now of the equity lens that the city's working very hard to address. That was just business as usual, and no one challenged it until it became really clear it was standing in the way of our progress, both personally as people and citizens, but also professionally as a market. And I think what you're talking about is key as well. These initiatives that you're working on are not just for one community, one zip code, they're for everybody. And the more that we can start popping those bubbles between ourselves, those little neighborhoods and communities, or suburb versus inner core or urban core, all that, here's a chance. We have a really special moment. And I'm really happy that you're in the seat that you're in. You're doing a fantastic job leading a lot of these initiatives. And I hope everybody wants to go out and do a little bit more digging and research and kind of go visit the website. What's the website where people can kind of see some of these updates and plans and stay up to date?
SanAntonioEDF.com. And of course, we're on social as well. And by the way, feel free to take that content and share that content, because you know, we're a lean, mean team at the EDF, but we need all of our different community partners helping to tell the story. So check out the website and please reuse the content.
Awesome. Jenna, thank you again for the time. I really appreciate it. This feels like economic development 101. I think everybody just walked out of there like, oh, wow, I like know a ton of stuff now. This is really cool. Seize that, keep going. If you're watching this, keep going with it and learn, and vote, 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 go out, make sure bottom of the ballot, fill those things out. Just get educated and show up, help the community, as Jenna said, challenge the norm, get in there and help us build a better San Antonio. Jenna, thank you again. Appreciate the time. And now we're going to start our Q&A.
Thank you.